Good evening. My name is Ari Horie, founder of the Women's Startup Lab. It's so thrilled for us to be here today. Would you please raise your hand for attending from Women's Startup Lab? Great. And how many of you are students from Draper U? Oh, wow, that's great. Women's Startup are located in Menlo Park, and we have a facility to run Founder Circle. We're trying to create a powerful women founders community where we support each other. Meantime, we bring amazing speakers from startup world to learn from what they have done and get inspiration. And today, obviously, we're really thrilled to have the team invite us over, and I have a special presentation to give this special keeper. I heard so much about his hero making, and I have this cake.
That's Wonder Woman? Oh, excellent. I will wear it with great pride.
Is it on?
Are we going to put it on? I might have to.
You might feel a little bit feminine.
I'm bringing out my feminine side. It's good.
All right.
It's good. Should I wear it with the jacket or should I?
Yes.
Yeah,
What do you think?
Okay.
So thank you so much, and here's a Tim Draper.
Terrific. Well, great. What a great pleasure.
Turn around, Tim. Turn around so we can see it. Woo-hoo!
Well, welcome everybody to Draper University. This is, I'll tell you just briefly a little bit about the school. We're a school that is for entrepreneurs. We don't really teach about entrepreneurs. We instead have entrepreneurs come in here and speak, and we changed the rules to pretty much every game they ever knew, so that they get the idea to start thinking, oh, an entrepreneur changes things. And we break it down into about 6 segments, the first of which is future. We don't teach history here, we teach future. So we combine predictive analytics and science fiction to get them just thinking, what's the future going to look like? This is shaping a little bit. And then we go through a little bit of a standard business program, but it's more hands-on. So it's for design. They actually paint and cook, and they do other things. They draw on the walls because we painted all the walls with whiteboard paint. Not these, by the way. So don't draw on them. And then we go through sort of a business type course, and everything's team-oriented. So the learning, there's peer pressure for the learning. And then we have survival training, because as entrepreneurs, you know you've got to survive. You've got to figure out how to survive. And that's both urban and rural survival training. And then at the end, they work up to a 2-minute pitch to venture capitalists, to a panel of about 12 venture capitalists at the end of the class. And it's about a 6 to 8 week program. And so we do about 4 a year, at least that's the plan. And we've run through, this is our 3rd time doing it. We had a pilot, and then we had sort of a beta, and this is sort of a post-beta. We're never really saying we're at 1.0. By the way, that's good advice. If I'm going to give you any advice, never get to 1.0, because then you can always say, oh yeah, sorry, customer service, we're working on that. We don't quite have it down to the science yet. So I am happy to do it in a couple of different ways. I have something prepared, or I can just open it up to questions, or we can do a combo. So, combo. So why don't I start just kind of going through this. We didn't have enough women here at Draper University the first couple of times, and so my wife, my sister, and my mother all went to Smith College, and it's one of the only remaining all women's college is so that we did a business plan competition there, and the winners were able to get a scholarship to Draper University, and so we're priming the pump there. We also have a Heidi Roizen scholarship. Heidi's one of the entrepreneurs I funded way back when. She's a very famous, successful venture capitalist entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley, and so she's given out a scholarship for women. And we're doing everything we can to bring it up to at least 50-50. And I'll tell you why I'm saying at least eventually. So that's us. We're here. I bought a building and then just thought, why not just start a school? And then I realized I didn't really know anything about starting a school, and so I thought, well, what do I know something about? I know something about entrepreneurship because I've had many years as a venture capitalist going out and funding them, meeting them, working with them, making them heroes. This is our credo, and it's things like I will promote freedom at all costs, I will treat people well, I will fail and fail again until I succeed. They say it every morning, and it's great fun. Across the street here, we have Boost, and it's run by my son, sort of a family operation here, I guess. My son, Adam, has started an incubator, and he's now considered Mr. Bitcoin because he started the first Bitcoin incubator. Bitcoin is this new currency that is more secure than most government currencies, and just getting started, and so that's quite exciting. So let me tell you, I funded something like 30 companies with women at the top, with entrepreneurial women starting the business and at the top. And I was thinking, well, what can I tell you about how my perception of how women are as entrepreneurs? Well, they are much better communicators than men. They are much better for society. They're thinking about how we're going to make society a better place, and men are thinking, how do I take over the world? They're tighter with money. They're making, they'll make lots of small investments in marketing. They won't make that big one. And that actually can work in their favor or not. They're tougher. They can take more. They're tougher. They somehow can take more emotional pain. They can take more pain. I've noticed they're very good at letting people go, and they're very good at hiring people. They're more intuitive. They have more of a good sense for what could potentially be coming out there. And they have major consumer power because they understand what it's like. It's 80% of the retail shopping is done by women. So that's here are the things that I've had where I'm thinking, okay, women could work on. And one is they're less willing to take over the world. What's interesting is they're less willing to change society, and they're more afraid of going really big, like beyond what the area they're comfortable with. So, my advice to you women entrepreneurs is take over the world, break society norms, be unpopular, and go big.
Yes!
And if you don't think I'm right, look at these women. They have all taken very unpopular stances. Okay? Oprah, she decided she was going to create an emotional talk show. She was panned in the press. Everybody thought she was crazy. She came from nothing. She was this amazing entrepreneur who built her way up to becoming one of the wealthiest people in the world. Marissa Mayer came to work at Yahoo pregnant, and then she said, oh, by the way, there's going to be no more of this telecommuting. Everybody's got to be here all the time. Completely unpopular. But all of a sudden, it was the right CEO move. All of a sudden, Apple is starting to show signs of life. Sheryl Sandberg, she took two unpopular things. First, she left a very safe, good, great job at Google to go run this startup with these crazy guys. But the other thing she did was she wrote Lean In. Lean In is quite controversial. It gets people sort of thinking. It makes them a little uncomfortable. It's fun to see her out there plugging that. And then Meg Whitman, perhaps my favorite of the four, she took on the teachers union head on. I mean, not many people are willing to take that kind of a risk. And of course, she was like instrumental in the building of eBay, and she now is trying to do sort of an interesting turnaround of HP, which is something I hope she succeeds in. So there are some of my favorite superwomen. And this one has potential. This is my daughter. She's the Valley Girl, and she has a pink talk show, and she gets people, great entrepreneurs to do silly things on her show. So she's kind of the Ellen for business. It's that kind of thing. And she's all those things. She wants to take over the world. She's just going to go for it. So watch that show, and we'll watch this girl rise. So this is my advice to women in business. I did read at least part of Sheryl Sandberg's book.
Hello.
It should be higher up. Here? Here. Okay. And I thought, she goes pretty far with it, but then I thought, no, go way farther. Don't just lean in, break in. Go all in as an entrepreneur. Just go all in and just make whatever it is you want to make happen. Just go after it, make it happen. Don't worry about all the naysayers. Don't worry about that people tell you that, oh, it's not good for society or whatever, because it is. Success in business, on the whole, and almost to the company, is really good for society. If I make a deal with you, we're both better off.
I hope you will.
Well, we're both but we'll both be better off. And that's true with almost every company in the world. There are a few, and you take a few shots at them, but think about the world. It gets better and better and better every day. Our world, we complain about it, and we have all these problems and whatever, but everything gets better every single day. And it's mostly because of people like you who are starting businesses and have visions of a better life, a better future, whatever. So then whenever I hear about this glass ceiling thing, I think, well, why would you worry about a glass ceiling when if you're an entrepreneur, you can paint your ceiling any color you want? So I really think that women should become more entrepreneurial. They're really good at it. And I have had quite a bit of success with women entrepreneurs. And I've made quite a few investments in them because I thought, well, if you're starting a company and you're a woman, you're even more extraordinary than if you're starting a company and you're a man. So already you're off to a head start. So these are some of the women that I was able to back. And before this last one, I was thinking, on all these women investments, I've done okay, but it has not been quite as good as the entrepreneurial things that I've backed with men. But I got to tell you about this one. So Robin Wolliner started Parenting Magazine, and she tripled my money in 6 months. Thank you, Robin. Heidi Roizen started Teamaker, which was a clip art company, and she tripled my money in about 9 months. Thank you, Heidi. Beth Cross started Ariat Boots. I don't know if you guys, any of you ride horses, but Ariat Boots are amazing boots. And she made me about 20 times my money in about 10 years, so the IRR was not as great as it might have been. Kathleen Dahlgren created a company that was a cognitive search engine, and it's called Cognition. And it was a really high-tech business and really complicated. And we had kind of written it off. We kind of felt like this thing's over. But she just kept at it, kept at it, kept at it. And just 3 days ago, we just sold that company to a big public company. And I tripled my money, and it had been sitting there for quite a while. But still, I thought it was gone, and she just kept at it, and eventually the persistence really paid off. And now Elizabeth Holmes. This is a woman who's going to be a household name in 6 months or something. She started something called Theranos, and it's completely in skunkworks, but it has been valued at in the billions of dollars. And I started it with her. I mean, I just gave her some money when she was 19 years old, and now she's about 29, and this company is worth billions. And so I have made, if this ends up being worth what those last people paid or more, betting on women turns out to be the best thing I ever did.
Can you repeat the name of her company?
Theranos.
Theranos?
Well, I'm keeping it down because it's a little in skunk works right now. And in 6 months, you will never forget the name. You'll see. It's blowing healthcare away. Now we're going to do a little fun thing with viral marketing. If we can get you to stand up and give a high five to as many people as you can, and as soon as you get a high five from anyone, stand up. And we'll just see how fast we can get everybody standing up in the room. Ready? Go. Everybody, now once you're hit, you can keep high-fiving people. Down when you get high five. All right, so that's viral marketing. You get the message and you tell a few of your friends, and then they tell a few of their friends that it's time to stand up, and then all the way up, and then it's time to sit down, and you tell your friends and they tell their friends. It turned out that I kind of lucked out on this one. I was sitting in a board meeting with these Hotmail guys, and they said, hey, we've got free email and it's up. And I said, oh, well, that's great, but how are you going to get the word out so people can try this? And they said, well, we're going to put it on billboards, we're going to put it on TV, everybody's going to know about this. And I thought, wait a second, that's all really expensive, and we didn't give you guys very much money. And then I thought, well, isn't there a way you can get it out to all those people on the web? And they said, no, that would be spamming. And by the way, if you guys got better and better at this, that would be the equivalent of spamming. If you got really good at going up and going down and going up. So spam, what was that? Not if they opt in. Good. Here's an entrepreneur. So what happened was I said, well, what if you just put a little message at the bottom of everybody's email that says, P.S. I love you. Get your free email at Hotmail. And they looked at me like, okay, there were 21 investors that we went to. Why were you the guy who said yes? And finally, I pounded, and finally they said, okay, but no P.S. I love you. Just get your free email at Hotmail. And it spread to 11 million users in 18 months, and it was the fastest growing consumer product of all time. I was very excited. And, but to this day, I believe if they had left the P.S. I love you in there, we would have had a much more peaceful and loving world. So that's viral marketing. Social marketing or social media is, there's all this spam, and then people are going, no, I don't want to talk to everybody. I'm getting all this spam. I just want to talk to my friends. And so that was the beginning of MySpace and Facebook, and actually Friendster. And then crowdsourcing. Okay, can anybody give me a ride to the airport after this? Okay, thank you, but I actually don't need it. But that's crowdsourcing. In effect, what's the most efficient way to get me my ride to the airport? So these are just some definitions you guys should know, because this is what marketing at Draper University is like, and it's what you guys should be thinking about. Now, crowdfunding is who here would give $1 to cure lung cancer? Okay, so just about everybody but the two lawyers. So that's what crowdfunding is. You can actually bring together all of these interest groups from all over the world and have certain great things happen. Very exciting. This is just this shows the user adoption of Hotmail and ICQ and Kazaa that were all done about the same time. But then user adoption in Skype, which is another one we left into, grew even faster. But what I'm not showing you is like companies like Bang with Friends, and there are companies now that are growing at a much faster clip. So we're all much better interconnected. If you come up with something that's really interesting, it can spread throughout the world much quicker. And I'm going to tell you just a quick story about crowdsourcing. We had this company we invested in. It was called Pebble, and the company was almost out of business. I had put some money in, and the entrepreneur came to me and said, "God, I think this thing's over." And I thought, "Oh well, there goes another one." And then he said, "Well, we're going to try something." And they put a video up on Kickstarter. And it took about 3 weeks, and they had $10 million worth of both orders and free money that they got on Kickstarter. And so all of a sudden, there was this new way to finance your company, build your inventory, get prepaid. This is a really exciting new way of thinking. And a lot of these companies have benefited from that kind of crowdsourcing. So now I'm going to take you back into a little bit of my history so you get a little bit of a flavor for what I've been able to do. What I saw early on was that once we were in the software realm and away from the hardware realm and kind of going into the internet realm, and partly because of Hotmail. In fact, the founder of Hotmail sent one email to his friend in India. And India for us was like another planet at that time. And he sent one email to his friend in India, and within 3 weeks he had 100,000 registered Hotmail users in India. And at that time, I haven't done the numbers, but I think there were fewer than 100,000 computers in India at that time. So it was a really interesting way to finally communicate. But what it made me think was, wow, you can start a business anywhere. It's no longer a monopoly here in the Silicon Valley, it's everywhere. And so I panicked, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? And so I thought, well, I can't create offices all the way around the globe unless I do this sort of franchise model. And so I set up this franchise model, and so by doing that, I got to go all over the world and set these things up. So I can tell you a few stories about going around the world. Well, you heard the Hotmail story. My dad was actually the first Indian venture capitalist, first one to set up a fund in India, and it did quite well. But we've since set up several offices there, and my partner in India, after about my third trip, said, okay, Tim, are you ready to cross an Indian street? I'm looking, and there's an elephant crossing here, and there's a motorcycle shooting through here, and a guy with a rickshaw, and a car coming this way. And it felt like there were like 17 streets all coming into this one intersection where we were going to walk across. I thought, okay. And so I start walking across, and I get halfway across, and then I sprinted to the other side, and I said, no! I said, what? I got to cross, no problem. He goes, no sudden movements. So everybody in India is doing partial differential calculus, figuring out where everybody's going to be so that they know exactly where to walk. And that is great opportunity there because there are so many great software engineers and all that analysis they have to do. So then I went to Estonia. This was an interesting story. I was with Tony Perkins, who spoke earlier today, and Tony said, you know, I'm counting on you to come speak at this event in Palo Alto. And I said, oh gosh, I really want to do that, but I've also got to be at the first Skype board meeting in Tallinn, Estonia. And Tony said, and we kind of looked at each other, and then I said, what do you think? Should we try doing a video conference there? And I said, and during that time, video conference was like this. And he said, sure, why don't we try it? And can you get that guy, Nicholas Zenstrom, to be on the thing with you and do like a Q&A? And I said, oh, sure, no problem. I called Nicholas, and he said, yeah, happy to do it. So, and then Nicholas kind of looks at me a little funny, and he goes, yo, at that time, Skype was just audio, and there were about 3 million people who had somehow signed up. I don't know if they all used it, but signed up. And he looks at me and goes, you know, we've been working on some video. And I said, oh, that's great. And then I said, but make sure you get a good video conferencing system here so that we can really make this thing work. And he goes, no problem. So we're sitting there and we're getting ready to go. And Nicholas goes, okay, throw the switch. And I said, what switch? And he said, well, we're going to test out our software. And I said, oh, well, we've got a phone for a backup. They'll just put our picture up on the wall and we'll talk. And we went through the whole thing, and it went off without a hitch. And I said, Tony, how'd that go? And he goes, oh, it was perfect. We saw you as clear as a bell. Everything was perfect. And I turned to Nicholas and I said, how did you do that? And he said, well, we, we had something like 100,000 simultaneous users that we cut off so that we could get the bandwidth so that we could use all that bandwidth to do the video conference. So if you were on a Skype call at that time, I apologize. China's been a great experience for us. When I first went there with my dad, it was 30 years ago. And we went, he was on a UN mission, and I was just there for the ride. We landed in the Beijing airport, and we drove in the only car that I saw in all of Beijing, on the only paved road to the only international hotel defined by the toilets in all of Beijing. And everybody was sharing, with baskets, selling things, moving back and forth on bicycles. No cars anywhere. So I went back about 15 years later, and I thought, and I went to Shanghai, and I went from Shanghai to Hangzhou, and I was looking out the window and I was thinking, God, everybody lives in the same 2-story concrete tilde. And then all of a sudden I saw one with blue windows and a spire and a nice little paved driveway. I thought, oh, interesting. And then I kept going, and I saw another one. And then I saw 3, and the driveways were all connected, and blue windows were all lined up. And I thought, wow. First thing I thought was that blue window salesman is going to make a fortune. But then the next thing I thought was, oh wow, this is going to be just like keeping up with the Joneses, what we used to do here in the U.S. Where if your neighbor got a refrigerator, you had to get a refrigerator. If your neighbor got a telephone, you got to get a telephone. If your neighbor got the internet access, you got to get internet access. But you get the idea. And I thought, wow, this is really going to change China. And so then I went back to my partner and he said, we got to invest in China. It's going to be a really good time. But then I did a little research, and one of the Chinese companies that got to be $90 million in revenues was a chocolate company, just got nationalized. So in effect, the government just took it from the entrepreneur who created it. And I thought, wow, this is dangerous. So the first few entrepreneurs that came to us said, oh, it's okay, we've got good government connections. So we invested in these 3 companies that had good government connections. Lost all our money in all 3. And then I thought, well, let's give this a shot. As my partners are kind of getting very nervous, I said, let's give this a shot. What do we really back? We back really extraordinary, driven, excitable entrepreneurs who really want to change things. And so we thought, okay, well, we'll make a few investments like that. And those investments turned out to be Baidu, and Focus Media, and Kongzhong, and YiPay, and some of the most incredible Chinese companies. We were there early, and it worked out extraordinarily well. And so we kind of had this renaissance. And I think that I had something to do with how China opened up, because I went, when I first went to this Chinese minister after I had heard about the chocolate company, he said, you must invest in our country. We have lots of people. And I said, no, I'd never invest here. And he said, why not? And I said, because, and I told him about the chocolate company getting nationalized. And he said, well, what would you suggest? And I said, well, I would suggest that you let people make a lot of money and bring it back to the U.S., and then you'll have more money here than you know what to do with. And he thought about it for a while, and he goes, And I wasn't quite sure what meant, but I think it meant, go ahead, invest here, and things will work out. So they did. Singapore is, this is a bittersweet story for me. First of all, the Singapore government was the first one who invested in DFJ's international offices, and so I'm very thankful to that. And then I brought my daughter, Jessie, to Singapore, and she looked around and she said, wow. I said, well, it's like the Jetsons. And I thought, oh my gosh. She's looking at it, she's comparing it to our country, and she's saying, this is more modern, more spectacular, more everything than our own country. And I always thought, oh, America, we've got everything. And so I said, well, what about San Francisco? And she said, well, it's kind of falling apart there. And I said, well, what about New York City? She said, that one's already gone. And so I got this feeling that we're doing, something cool is happening in the Far East, and something not so cool is happening in the U.S. And then I learned a lot more about it when I tried to put this school together. I talked to the town council, and there were the state laws and the ADA laws and the fire laws and the safety laws, but we got so many laws they overlap. In fact, the Historic Society had a big argument with the fire department as to how many points of egress I'm allowed to have off that side. I was trying to solve the problem by saying, okay, how about a slide into the pool? Russia, I didn't understand Russia. I kept losing my investments there. I kept trying again because I knew there was such good technology there. I just didn't understand it. And then I finally went through the Hermitage Museum. It's one of the most gorgeous museums in the world. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is better than the Louvre. This is better than any museum I've ever seen in my life. Just gorgeous paintings of all the greatest artists in the world. But the floor's all scuffed up, and you can go put your finger right through one of those $10 billion paintings. It's just kind of not taken care of. And I said, what happened here? And they said, well, Russia really was the greatest country in the world. And then the Bolsheviks came in. And the Bolsheviks, 75, or I guess they were 90 years ago, the Bolsheviks came in. And they said, let's get rid of the rich. Okay, have you heard that here? Let's get rid of the rich. and let's overcome the rich. And no business. There's going to be no business in Russia. So for 75 years, Russia's gone without business. So imagine, finally Russia comes around, they say, well, yeah, maybe we should have a little business here. And so you're a 24-year-old entrepreneur, and you've got a great idea for a business. You have no role model. Your father, your mother, your grandfather, your grandmother, their fathers, their grandparents, none of them, all of them, believed that business was bad and illegal. And without business, without competition, progress just stops. And so that's what's happened in Russia. And so I'm still pushing, I'm still trying. We're on our 4th iteration now. There's always something. When our first money was, we were all set up and everything was ready to go, and then Khodorkovsky got put into jail. And all of a sudden the money dried up, and I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, Khodorkovsky got put into jail. And I said, what about it? He said, that was his money. So, Ukraine was a great experience too. We met the president of Ukraine. He ran he orchestrated the entire Orange Revolution. This guy Yushchenko, and Viktor Yushchenko. And the Orange Revolution was won by technology. It was, they would text each other and they'd say, we got to keep the pressure on the capital. We've got to keep, and so what they were doing is they were putting all the pretty girls in the front lines, and they'd put flowers into the guns. And then they'd run out of flowers, and they'd go, hey, we're out of flowers in sector A6, and if you can get us some borscht, that would be pretty good too. And so people kept the supply chain going through text messaging. And finally, that bad government fell, and this good government came about. And I met with him, and I said, again, I said, well, I'd never invest in your country. And he said, why not? And I said, because it takes 6 months, 23 bureaucrats before I can even incorporate in your country. And he said, that will be 1 bureaucrat, 1 week. And I said, well, that's great. It still hasn't happened. But the message was, we understand that we are in competition for the great minds of the capital and the entrepreneurs and the businesses of the world to come to our country. And we will do what it takes to get you there. Which was a really interesting message. And that brings me to Egypt and Tunisia. Those 2 countries fell. Now Egypt's falling again. But when there's a bad government, our technology wins all the wars. But technology now is this social thing. If we don't like a government, we can just kind of go, I don't like this guy. Let's see what we can do. Let's demonstrate. Let's throw a bomb here. So in effect, governments are in competition with one another, and that is very exciting because we, as citizens of the world, can choose, and they have to compete for us. America doesn't understand this just yet, but they will very soon. So what's interesting is a lot of really cool things are happening in competitive governments in the startup world. Okay, this was, all of these countries are eventually going to, get better leaders because of this social network. But this is a place called Sealand that's outside of England, and that's a country. That country is a free market, free country, and they just decided that they were going to start a country. I guess it's more than 11 miles off the British coast, and so they can have a country out there. And it's not recognized by the UN yet, but it's kind of interesting. And that country is now sort of competing for various taxpayers and people who don't want all the services governments can provide. Blue Sea is getting around the H-1B visa problem. They're a cruise ship, or this is their plan, to create a cruise ship that's 12 miles offshore, off Half Moon Bay here. And they're going to bring people in from all over the world who are good coders, and then they're going to have them spend the night on the boat, and then take a tourist visa in for the day, and go work at the shop, and then they go back out on the boat, and they're going to commute in. So that's another way, you know, we clever humans are figuring ways around bad governance. Bitcoin is a new currency. All these governments have these currencies that we don't trust anymore because they just print more money, and we think that we're holding on to a certain amount of value, and it drops over time because they're just printing more of them, and more than our economy can create. So Bitcoin, this clever team of people went off and they created a code out there that you can mine out in the world. And it's a new currency, and as Cyprus fell, Bitcoin soared. And so as countries have bad problems with their currencies, Bitcoin is going to be the place of refuge. This is my scariest chart. I'm sorry to show you terror in my speech, but in 1900, the U.S. spent 8% of their money on government. And today it's actually like 43. It's jumped way up. It's about 43, and it's almost been a straight line. And there's really nothing stopping it. Why do we need this many people telling us what to do? Just a thought. And this is even worse because this is that same graph, and this is a chart that shows what GDP growth is. Somehow this didn't come out on the thing, but basically we had really volatile GDP growth, but it was much higher, and now GDP growth is almost zero. And I believe that government spending as a percentage of GDP, the higher that is, the lower GDP growth is. So beware. The more the government spends of our money, the less growth we're going to have, and the less positive a society. And then we'll get more overregulated. Go ahead. The rest of you, you got it? This is a little like what I went through on the egress. Change is something we've all got to get used to. This is Moore's Law. This says that $1,000 worth of compute power doubles every 18 months. And so that means every 18 months, but actually now it's like every 14 months, you see it starting to accelerate. So almost every year, we have a new platform that's twice as powerful, or half as expensive, or just basically twice as good. So that means whenever there's something twice as good, like, okay, the iPhone 3 was about twice as good as the iPhone 2, the iPhone 4 was about twice as good, 4S was about twice as good, 5 is definitely twice as good as the 4S. Every time there's a new platform, there's a new opportunity for entrepreneurs to surround that platform. And those platforms aren't just in compute power. They're in DNA sequencing, memory devices, they're in MRI analysis, they're in photography. So many things are accelerating in all different directions. And so what that means, oh, this is interesting too. You know, people would say, oh, the world's not getting better. And I said, yeah, it's getting a lot better. This is the installed cost of electricity. It gets cheaper and cheaper. So imagine electricity down here at a nickel. This is one of those things that you never read in the press, but that's what's going on. Electricity is getting cheaper. Getting hot out there. So if these changes are happening so fast, and Moore's Law is just moving right along, imagine, think about first the inventions that have happened in the last 150 years and how they've changed our lives, okay? So the light bulb, indoor plumbing, radio, automobile, television, airplanes, the pill, the bomb, microwave, semiconductors, satellites, photocopiers, space travel, computers, email, fiber optics, biotech, cell phones, x-rays, internet, digital cameras, web browsers, search engines, smartphones. These have changed our lives a lot. Our lives are, imagine what it was like 150 years ago before you had this stuff. Okay, now put yourself ahead 15 years. In the next 15 years, the same amount of change will happen to humanity as happened in the last 150 years. So, so a lot of interesting things could happen. You know, near infinite energy supply, vertical hydroponics, self-navigating electric cars, design genomics, near thought communications. Did it work? Okay, maybe. It's still coming. Food drop. This is one of my favorites. I always, when I was a little kid, I used to run around and I just wanted to play. I didn't want to worry about food, but then I get hungry and I go, God, if only we could have something where it's just food drop. And so we're getting closer. You know, you combine the ordering system online with the drones, and then you can take this one piece further. Yeah, it's taco drones. You can take this further, and you can have need anticipation. You can, where people are headed right now is here. The best entrepreneurs are trying to anticipate our needs. So, imagine this. Okay, you know you've got these things that test your blood pressure and your whatever output and your aura and whatever else. But imagine if it tested your blood glucose level, and it said, oh, his blood glucose level is down, and the pizza just shows up. So that's real need anticipation. And then, of course, all of the Star Trek things, the transporter, the holodeck, human rebalancing, and Martian colonies, are all in that 2-year period after the 15 years. So in 17 years, all these things are going to be happening. But this is another one I want somebody out there to figure out. I believe that humans and animals will be able to communicate through some sort of device. Now, it's going to start with just human to human, like, you know, we'll communicate with people who speak Swahili or whatever through some voice box. But animals, I mean, you think about a bird that goes tweet, 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 tweet. I think in between each of those tweets is like a paragraph. And if you can start with that as your concept, I think you can somehow figure this thing out. This is another big trend. Since if you come up with something that's the next big thing, it's going to spread around the world faster than it ever did before. Everybody, the world knows whenever anything happens. So if you have a breakthrough, the world's going to know. So it all spreads through this faster. And if you stare at this long enough, I can read your mind. What does DFJ look for, and what do I look for in what to fund? I'm looking for a couple of things. One is iconoclasts. I'm looking for companies that, with some new technology, are going to break through some industry that's been this way forever. So the way Hotmail broke into the post office, I mean, we used to write things down on paper, fold them up, put them into an envelope, lick this thing that tasted poisonous, put a stamp on it, you know, lick that thing, and then it would go into a car, into an airplane, into another car, and maybe get there in a week or two. And that was the way we all communicated. Well, there is no reason for us to have a post office right now. It costs us, what, $3 billion a year? Why do we have that? Just give everybody an iPad. Skype did the same thing to the telecom world. They just turned it upside down. They were freaking out. They all decided they were going to just lobby Washington until they gave Vonage a really hard time, but Skype somehow ended up unscathed by that. eBay took on trade. You know, it used to be like a trading post, and then all of a sudden, hey, there's no post. We can just trade anybody, anywhere. And then my son, Facebook was a major breakthrough, because I said to my son, well, you know, look it's Sunday, go out and play with your friends. He looks down at his computer and he goes, I am Dad. He was on Facebook. Same thing, Google. Sometimes I wonder why people fund big libraries right now. I mean, just give them the internet. I look for clever business models too, and those are models where there are lots of zeros in the balance sheet and income statement. Now, not under cash, not under profits, not under sales, but all the other places. Like Amazon figured out how to create a business that had millions and millions of books with no inventory, no accounts receivable. Amazing business. Hotmail was pretty cool, and Skype, because they had no marketing budget. It just spread the way you guys just did your high fives. And then we look for disruptions, and this is happening more and more. This is a solar panel utility, Solar City. It's really a solar panel utility. Enernoc is a smart grid utility. They go and they figure out what is going on up there in the grid. And they say, oh, we're going to have a brownout here in New Jersey. And so all the Safeways who have stored their power, their backup power, say, oh, okay, well, we'll give you some at the highest price we possibly can from New York City. Tesla took on the automotive industry. Oh my gosh, imagine that. Taking on an industry with the most assets of any industry in the world. And a total oligopoly. Even after Toyota and Honda came in, it was still an oligopoly. And they took it on, and they're winning. It's unbelievable. SpaceX, by the same guy, pretty much, is launching a payload into space for 1/200th of the cost that the government was paying to launch the same payload into space. So now the government has hired SpaceX to do their launches. Clever. So what other industries are ripe for disruption? Anything that looks like a sloppy monopoly. Anything that looks like, hey, that guy got rich, he's getting rich, and he's not working. Or she's not working. Whoever's in those industries. So I look at those and I go, okay, one's finance, and I might as well take a shot at my own industry. Finance and education are two of my industries. The venture capital business is getting sloppy. The investment banking business has been sloppy for at least a decade. They went from a firmly written offering to best efforts. So they went from we will guarantee you we'll get you your IPO out to we'll give it a shot. And somehow that's not working. Medicine, I mean, whether it's Obamacare or not, medicine is so broken. The idea that if you cure cancer today, it will take 20 years for that drug to get to market, and it will cost nearly $1 billion. Does that make sense? I don't think so. Databases, we really have just one supplier there, Oracle, and I think there are big opportunities there. Aerospace, I mean, when was the last time the airplanes really changed? I think we can do something better there. And education, that's a mess. K-12 education, I mean, hey, let's face it, anybody here from the teachers union? Let's blow up the teachers union. They are ruining education for our kids. It's a disaster. Just, the teachers are great, except some need to be fired.
Randy Weinberg is the worst thing to happen in education.
It's not one person, it's systemic. They have, here's my thing, they have a monopoly. They are lazy. There is no competitive teachers union. That's what you guys can do, create a competitive teachers union. That'd be great. So remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, entrepreneurs are heroes. They take long odds of extraordinary outcomes. They make our lives better. They build wealth for community. The world gets better, everybody's better off. So thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.
computing and anticipating needs out of 15 years.
So one was, why self-navigating cars? Why not self-driving cars? Yeah, okay, let's get into drive too. Okay. The other one was
Cloud computing.
Cloud computing.
Anticipating needs 15 years out.
oh, why is anticipating needs 15 years out? Well, it's not. I'm just thinking that when you eventually have the thing that brings the pizza to you instantaneously, I think that may be, I don't know, maybe 10?
Cloud computing.
No, cloud computing was, oh, I see what you're saying. No, it's over the next 15 years. Okay, and then over the next 2 years after that. Yeah, it's a continuous swipe. Sorry, that wasn't clear. Yes?
I thought I said you expect more 10x returns for 3x returns and
Right, but I'm happy with the 3x return. And we had a few 20, and the one that's still in Skunkworks is a 1,100 times return. But we've had a lot of disasters too. I could bore you for years with all the failures I've made. Yeah.
At what point are companies ready to pitch for VC funding?
As soon as they need money. I think they need to pitch right away. You should be pitching, if you're CEO of your company, you should be pitching for money until you are cash flow positive.
The minute you have an idea?
Right away, because you have an idea. The reason to start pitching people is you start learning, because you read their face, you start pitching. I start giving you this idea for like self-navigating cars, and you're looking at me like, not sure. And they say, well, what if they're flying? And then you say, yeah, well, that's a little better. And then we have that feedback loop. So it's always worth it to go out there and pitch. You are always pitching for money until you are cash flow positive, until your business is cash flow positive. Yeah.
Will you look at my frizzy?
Will I look at your presentation?
Yeah, with how to create a frizzy. It's a type of presentation.
It's a short presentation?
Oh.
If it's a really, really short presentation, I'll look at it. Oh, I'm Tim at dfj.com, and then I'm just Tim Draper and all these other things. Yeah.
So if you're so optimistic about the future, and I was preaching that, God, you have to be right to be an entrepreneur. And then are so down on GDP growth not just down on GDP growth, but down on government spending. Why are you here in California?
Why do I live here?
Yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh, if I were starting out, I would definitely be in Singapore.
Okay.
Okay, Singapore, New Zealand. Let's see. There's a list now. I mean, they're very smart. It is competitive. There are Singapore, New Zealand.
You see the air quality reports from Singapore lately?
Except Tim.
Air quality in China is not very good. Singapore's okay.
In Singapore, there's corporal punishment in the schools. A
Yeah,
friend
but-
of mine lives there, so
Right, I know. I was on- I
and
was-
also, gay people are like totally ostracized and can be persecuted and criminalized. So there are negatives to that.
But
society.
beware, that's the old Singapore.
That's not
And
true.
they've
Well,
changed
it
their
is.
ways.
I've got a friend that's been
They've changed their
grew up
ways. They're
there.
encouraging creativity. They've already become one of the wealthiest countries on the planet, and they're
Yeah.
changing their ways because they realize they need more creativity, and so
Well,
they
hopefully
probably
that's-
want more gays and
Yeah.
more, maybe not drugs, but yeah.
So a non-business person starts a business and they fund it themselves. So what you're saying?
Oops.
Oops. They believe in themselves so much, but you do. But what I'm feeling from you that you should always be pitching regardless. But maybe you only want it to be so big. And I know you say go big, but there is that problem.
You have to start with a wedge. You have to start very small.
Right.
You have to start with something that a lot of people might want, but is very simple, and it's your specialty. It's what you do better than anyone else. Then you can grow into other things, but you have to get something done. I call it a wedge into the market.
Traction.
Yeah. Well, better than traction, you got to figure out how the business works before you go big. But when you go big, when you figured out the business model, don't be afraid to just go big. Raise a ton of money and go for it. When you figured out your model. And once you, like if you started a store, for instance, and that store suddenly became very profitable, and you knew that you only had a limited amount of time before all the copycats came in, you should go big and go all over the world very, very quickly. Yeah. Yes?
You know, the media loves talking about women having a hard time fundraising. Do you agree with that?
I think everybody has a hard time fundraising. I don't think that's specific to gender or any other thing. I think it's really hard. I mean, you know, you're asking me for my hard-earned money to go into your business. It's a real challenge. I'll tell you, here's my biggest fundraising tip. Make a connection with the person. They have to feel like, okay, I can trust you with this. You're going to work as hard as you possibly can. I know you're going to give it your all. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, we lost again. Yeah. I don't think it's when, you know, I think it's because I know that in the venture capital business, we become like automatons. It doesn't matter who brought it to us, what it is. All we care about is this interesting enough? Is it in an interesting market? Now, then when they come in and pitch, they've just got to be really enthusiastic. And they've got to get along well. The worst thing you can do is bring in your partner, and then you guys start arguing. And the best thing you can do is have a lot of faith in each other. Hand waver.
I'm Hazel. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I listed a tech company on the Australian Stock Exchange. I'm running another high-growth tech company. I've just moved it here because I want to be really big. Now, what I want to ask you, those women that you work with, you've talked about their persistence, you've talked about why they were good investment, but what is it about them that you want, the key thing you would have changed? You were sitting across the board table from them and you wanted to just say, come on, just do this better. What is that thing that we could be developing in ourselves so we're running billion-dollar companies instead of $20 million companies?
The first thing I would do, I mean, some people like that term. I would stop saying I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is what I was put on the earth to do. It's a much better way of making your connection. I'm a serial entrepreneur. It's like, oh, you're going to just flip from this to the next thing to the next thing. You know, I'm investing in you, and you're going to you might be here for a half a year and go on to the next thing. I want somebody who says, I was put on the earth to beg. I was put on the earth to do whatever this is. And then you get this feeling like, wow, this girl's got a lot of passion, and she really wants to make this thing work. And she seems completely dedicated, and there's nothing that's going to stop her. And really, we invest in this way. We don't invest in this way. We're chasing the train to invest. So it has to feel like this business is a train leaving the station. I've got to be running for it. Instead of like, oh boy, here she comes again. Oh, what am I going to do with her? Yeah, in the straight line. Always, by the way, when you speak in an audience, always the most dangerous question, dead center, in the back. But go ahead.
So the question I have is this. There's a lot of discussion about women being less funded than men.
Less what?
Less funded than men.
Yeah.
Is there some advice that you would give women to kind of change that perception?
Raise more money. I don't think this is I don't think there's any bias anymore. I mean, women have made a lot of money for a lot of men. Men get it. Yeah, that might just be a media thing. Just really think about venture capitalists as purely out for the money. So if they think you're going to make them money, they're going to bet on you. If they think you're going to give them trouble, they will not bet on you. If they think that that your business has figured it out and you've got your model down, they will run after you to throw money at you. So I think, actually the best message came from one of the entrepreneurs we had in the class last time. And he said, hey, I just realized that I've been running around trying to raise money from venture capitalists. I thought, why don't I just focus on getting customers and getting the business going? And then if your business is going, then the venture capitalists come flying at you. You won't be able to stop them. They'll be like fleas. Yeah. Last question? Last question.
My name is Pamela, and I just wanted to follow up on one of your comments. You have mentioned countries such as Singapore, New Zealand, being a little bit more familiar to innovation, and more people are kind of clamoring to go there. But I see a lot of people clamoring to come to the United States.
Yes,
So
we're living off our reputation. And coming to California, which was like the worst place to do business. But it has this incredible reputation because it used to be the best. And it's beautiful that it was 3,000 miles away from Washington, D.C. This was a great place to start businesses. And the thing we've got going for us is you guys, the Silicon Valley and the whole system, this virtuous cycle, funding companies, they grow. It's more money, they fund more companies, they grow, and fund more companies, they grow. We were incredibly resilient in the year 2000, actually because women are in the workforce. We didn't have bread lines because there was at least one person was still making money. So I think this is still probably, if on the whole, I still live here. I still think this is the best place to start a business because you at least see what all the competition is doing. But other governments are catching on. And I've got to say that when I'm in China, sure it's got bad pollution, but in China, I'm seeing new ideas that I have not seen in the Silicon Valley. So those kinds of things are starting to happen too. That other countries are doing their own organic growing of entrepreneurship, and that's exciting. And it's good. And competition is good for everybody, as long as we're continuing to be able to move from country to country. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You guys are very. Oh, really?
You don't need
You better run a little slower.
We have to bring a pink one next time.
I like my cake. Thank you.
Can you stand by for just a moment?
Tim, I just want to pass on to Ellie, my partner. She's awesome, and she's going to tell us next program.
Hey, here's what you don't want to do is be the follow-up speaker to Tim Draper. Okay? It's a really unpleasant position to be in. So I have a few small tactical things and a little bit of an inspirational thing. First of all, we are going to adjourn a few founders from Women's Startup Lab into the PDR through these doors here. Tim's going to come with us, and the students can come along for mentoring with these founders. We're running a little bit over time because, of course, nobody liked the one-on-one today. But we had planned for an hour of mentoring between Women's Startup Lab founders and Draper U students. And if you're a Women's Startup Lab founder and you have one of these pieces of paper, that means that you belong in that room over there. We exist, Women's Startup Lab exists, as Ari said, in Menlo Park, and we exist under the roof of some very generous, thoughtful, creative, and smart people. And those people are the people at the law firm Procopio. Roger Rappaport is casually leaning up against the wall in the back. He is an attorney in the technology practice, the Silicon Valley office of Procopio. They do excellent work, and we're very grateful to have their support. We have a lovely office thanks to them, and Roger provided dinner for us tonight. Thank you very much.